and gentlemen. My name is Kit Cabello. I'm the host of Hardlens Media, but today we're going to do something a little different for this debate / conversation. There's a lot of, talk about how this primary turned out, and of course the aftermath was a lot of our candidates, most notably Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Now, joining me here today is Jose Requena, who's one of our fellow co-hosts on our Monday show, and also a good friend of the show, Niko House, as well. And of course, Jose, you reached out to Niko about talking about maybe some criticism about the Tulsi Gabbard campaign and some issues maybe brought up during the primary as well. One thing I will ask both of you, let's respect each other's time, as well as, each person's different opinions and points of view. But with that being said, I think it's fair that we actually do an intro first so that everyone who's maybe not familiar with either one of you two, just here's maybe your background in regards to journalism and activism. Jose Requena, we'll start off with you, and then Niko House, and then we'll get into debate. So, Jose, you have 3 minutes. Use them however you wish.
Thanks. My name is Jose Requena. I grew up in Chicago, in the neighborhood of Little Village. I grew up in the city of Chicago. I traveled abroad for 4 years, which really impacted my politics. I think that has had the biggest effect on my politics, and that was over all of Obama's first term. I came back after his first term and got involved in organizing in Chicago, try to understand the city. Been organizing around issue organizing and electoral politics since 2013. And, I've been contributing with Hardlens Media since December of 2019. And just happy to be here.
All right. Niko House.
First of all, thanks for hosting us, guys. I always appreciate the work that you do. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Niko House. I was a surrogate for Tulsi 2020 campaign. I also was the acting state director for Bernie's 2016 campaign, the founder and president of Carolina Students for Bernie Sanders, and the president of North Carolina Colleges for Bernie Sanders. I did run the largest Bernie Sanders organization in the country with over 350 members in 2016, active members. I also discovered I was a co-founder, I should say, of the Dnc Fraud Lawsuit, where Attorney Spiva, on behalf of the DNC, said that the DNC could rig the election in a back smoke-filled room, and we couldn't do anything about it. That was that fraud lawsuit. Now I just, obviously I run the MCSC network with Fiorella and Pots with the Convo Couch, Robbie Yeager, and others. And I dedicate most of my time to journalism and election integrity activism and foreign policy, of course.
All right. Well, thank you so much. All right. Now let's get started with the first part of this debate and conversation. So, Jose, you reached out to Niko House in regards towards Tulsi Gabbard and I guess her trying to build a coalition with those who are Republican voters or those who are with Republican leadership, as well as libertarians in some way. And you said that sometimes her message might be mixed up or hurt progressive causes in a way. Can you please clarify what exactly some of the criticism you have towards what Tulsi Gabbard is trying to do with this coalition, as well as some parts of her campaign as well? It's only fair that you start with this.
I appreciate it. Thanks. And yeah, I mean, that's also why I've asked for this conversation. I'm not here to tear down Tulsi Gabbard. I've respected a lot of the moves that she's made. I do feel, though, that she is trying and is being helped to capture kind of the anti-imperialist hard left direction and then funnel it into kind of what I think is kind of like progressive nationalism in some ways. Which makes a whole lot of sense, but isn't, what happens is people talk across each other because of it. When she mentions Project Veritas in her tweets, people that respect Project Veritas's track record and their mission statement pay attention to what she's doing. So I understand that draws attention to the issues that she's trying to highlight in ballot harvesting and election integrity. But it's brand making that serves her brand and not leftist politics overall. And I think there needs to be room for that discussion. And even the discussion if, what she's doing is more effective than, which I think at times it is, which is another reason why I asked for this clarity. I feel in some ways that she virtues to disaffected youth overall, not right or left, just people disaffected with the entirety of the system, its legitimacy, and what it runs on. I do feel that a flashpoint that happened recently that has made some severe, boundaries and barriers between what has become kind of her camp and what people call like the Brooklyn left, I think has been whether her campaign is funneling people into joining the military. And there's, a lot of intellectual leftists that feel like, well, the real anti-imperialist move is making sure that we have less military recruitment overall. But then they're silent on international policy issues, which does hurt their legitimacy. And I think it's fair to point that out. So that's been my thing. Is she a socialist? Is she where leftists should be going to? I don't think so. That doesn't mean that she isn't making moves that challenge corruption and the power structure from a progressive direction. I just kind of want to clarify where it's coming from and what its end goals would be.
Right. Okay. Niko House, floor is yours.
So I don't really think that just because someone is a progressive or a socialist or considers themselves a democratic socialist means that they're progressive. One. Two, I think it's ludicrous to say that she's branding Project or increasing their brand by literally citing a video and then giving them credit for it from a journalistic standpoint, as you are part of the journalism community. You know that there are times where, unfortunately, we have to use Fox News because they are the source that the facts come from. We don't get to just not mention Fox News merely because we know that they're right wing. There are times where we have to mention CNN and other sources as well. Why? Because that's our job to do so. That does not mean we are increasing necessarily the brand of CNN, because like myself, I'm sure that you are very clear when you say that does not mean I trust CNN, but when the facts are objectively correct and they are introducing those facts, we have to give them credit. That's merely what Tulsi Gabbard is trying to do. And from a journalistic and integrity perspective, it would be wrong for her not to do so. Now, we can go back to the ballot harvesting. I don't like this idea that she is somehow reaching out to the right because she used Project Veritas, a Project Veritas video, which no one, by the way, has disputed is right. Like, nobody has disputed the legitimacy of the facts presented in the video, because there is ballot harvesting. Now, the dispute lies within the blaming of Ilhan Omar, the benefit to Ilhan Omar that ballot harvesting may have given. But Tulsi never mentioned Ilhan Omar. In fact, she's been the one out of even the squad that has defended Ilhan Omar the most, even going as far as making video defenses of Ilhan Omar when she was a victim of vicious Islamophobic attacks from both the Democrats and Republicans. Now, Tulsi has been an advocate for election integrity for years. This isn't just like a 2 weeks ago thing, which, by the way, she introduced the ballot harvesting legislation 2 weeks ago before Veritas even released a video. But in 2017, when I called her and spoke to her for an hour about what I experienced as far as election fraud in North Carolina, she subsequently, later on in 2017, introduced the Securing America's Elections Act, then reintroduced it again in 2019, and then has been speaking about it consistently ever since. And unfortunately, Jose, as far as I've seen, and like the Brooklyn progressives that you were referring to, that energy was nowhere to be found. The anger and the animus was nowhere to be found. The skepticism was nowhere to be found. The challenging of the election integrity system and legislation that she put forth was nowhere to be found, despite the fact that with ballot harvesting, in New Jersey, we did see Democrats, including a city council member, benefit from ballot harvesting. They're being challenged by the attorney general right now. But in North Carolina, we saw Republicans have to have an election completely overturned because they were found guilty of ballot harvesting. So this is a nonpartisan issue, like Tulsi presented. And if a leftist organization, which I can speak to personally, presented that information, Tulsi would also give them the correct credit because that's the right thing to do. But speaking about election integrity, talking about ballot harvesting when both the Democrats and Republicans have been guilty of it is a nonpartisan issue, and just another example of this of holding Tulsi accountable for things that they have never been worried about until Tulsi talked about it.
All right. Jose, Now, I know also you have brought up some concerns about this coalition as well. Do you care to at least bring rebuttal to anything that Niko House has stated?
Yeah, no, just that, I don't, like I would cite Fox News for accurate information to convince their viewers about the point I'm about to make, having that legitimacy. The same way that I would use CNN, the same way that I would use WAPO to say, hey, this is what the CIA is thinking right now. Or at least that's what they're trying to flex on. I don't think that she used Project Veritas in a different manner, that's all. And it doesn't mean that what they're saying is, disinformation. I'm saying that their mission statement has been one of disinformation with a clear goal in mind. That doesn't mean that she's agreeing with their goal. She's virtuing to that crowd. I don't think that that's
Go ahead, sorry.
any different than how journalists use which sources they reference. And I mean, she can be. I'm not disputing that ballot harvesting could, that elections overall are riddled with fraud, especially in our system. And I'm glad that she's on the forefront of that. I do think that there's people that take the issues of the elections and their integrity, and there's a lot of different strategies. Focusing on ballot harvesting, I don't think it's an illegitimate one. I think pushing, saving the postal service and making that a focus was another way to kind of draw attention to how fragile voting is when people are disengaged from the system altogether.
So I would
Niko, it's the final word.
So I would say that she's been focusing on the system. There's no other candidate. There's literally no other candidate outside of maybe Mike Gravel and some of the third-party candidates. But in the Democratic primary, there was no other candidate trying to win a race that focused on the system and changing it more than Tulsi Gabbard did. But the problem is there's this problem with progressives where they don't want to focus and focus that energy towards the legislation that Tulsi introduced. Because as we're having this conversation right now, I've never seen anybody talk about her legislation other than her supporters talk about her legislation to end the war in Syria, talk about the Fairness in Media Act, which directly affected us and benefited Bernie. They didn't talk about the fact that she wrote a paper in The Hill, op-ed, challenging the CIA when they tried to use the Russiagate narrative to tear down Bernie Sanders. I don't see the fact that when she introduced the Stop Arming Terrorists Act, got it passed through the House, went to the Senate, Trump sent it back down, and the Democrats were the ones who got the Stop Arming and Stop Financing Terrorism Act and the No More Presidential Wars Act out of the legislation. Nobody had any energy for any of that, but they want to focus on this virtue signaling nonsense, splitting hairs back and forth about whether or not something props up Project Veritas. How about, does it help progressives in the long run? Is this objectively the right thing to do? Is ballot harvesting objectively wrong and vulnerable? Check, check, check. Well, then we'll just go ahead and put a little qualifier if we need to. Not that I support Project Veritas, but we should be above reproach. Ilana Marsh has never been put in this situation. And if legislators would have passed Tulsi Gabbard's legislation 2 weeks ago, and if progressives would have talked about it, I guess we wouldn't be trying to figure out if she was guilty or not, nor progressives have to waste energy defending Ilan, but instead could be using that energy to ensure that legislators are pushing forward election integrity legislation, because really all of our futures rely on it. It isn't a Democratic or Republican issue. And that's the coalition she's building. That's what she's consistently fought for, is to do the right thing, regardless of whether or not it's considered a left-wing or a right-wing issue, just because it is in fact the right thing to do.
All right, let's stop right there. All right, Jose, you want to add any other comments to this?
Well, that was the final word, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But all right, so thank you for the correction. So, in regards to this, though, gentlemen, Jose, you've been a staunch Bernie Sanders supporter. Niko House, you've been a staunch Bernie Sanders / and then into 2020 Tulsi Gabbard supporter. But at the end of the day, that sacred document that all the Democratic candidates signed, all of them was basically to support whoever become the Democratic nominee. And of course, that person is, well, questionably Joe Biden. And of course, we've done numerous stories about how that election primary turned out. But in the long run, what does it really say about the message of people relying too much on name recognition individuals? Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard are both people, both with flaws, both have made mistakes. But there is this constant problem in our politics when we have team red, team blue, and hero worshiping of individuals. How do we move past that and especially when it comes down to bring in election integrity, political reform, and the movement by the people. How do we break away from that, all while not being, I guess, worshiping our politicians and putting them on pedestals? Niko, we'll start off with you.
So I think that it has to start with us. We just need to have a period of reconciliation where progressives admit they got 2020 wrong. They got 2019 to 2020 wrong. The fact of the matter is, if we're going to go policy by policy by policy, objectively speaking, Tulsi Gabbard was a better candidate than Bernie Sanders. Now, if you want to present the argument that he had more energy, then I would submit to that argument. But that's not what people were telling me in 2019. They were telling me it was about policy over personality. And that's not what we saw taking place. The fact of the matter is, where was Bernie at whenever Tulsi introduced the Election and Securing American Elections Act? He was nowhere to be found. The All Fossil Fuels Act, he was nowhere to be found. The amendment that her and Jayapal introduced that was going to permanently get big money out of politics by introducing a constitutional amendment. Even Ro Khanna supported this legislation, whereas Bernie Sanders did not co-author any legislation. But instead of acknowledging this reality, people wanted to scream Medicare for all without even understanding what Medicare for all being introduced in the Senate was as compared to what was introduced in the House. And these nuances that people refuse to acknowledge merely to prop up Bernie Sanders because they didn't want to hold him accountable is exactly why we're in the position we're in today. The progressive movement is more fractured than it's ever been, and it's not getting any better. Why? Because once again, Tulsi introduced legislation 2 weeks ago to hold our election system accountable and to make sure the integrity is maintained, and yet nobody talks about it until they think Ilhan Omar is somehow being blamed by Tulsi. That's absolutely unacceptable, and it's not going to get us anywhere. This is why earlier today I tweeted, progressives are trash on policy, because you can't possibly think anything we're going to get is passed if the moment that you don't want to talk about somebody's legislation because of who introduced it, and the only time you really want to talk about it is if you think somebody you like is being attacked. That's not going to get us anywhere. So I think that we really have to acknowledge that progressives were wrong. There is a clear double standard. I mean, let's be honest. Bernie was defending Joe Biden a couple of days ago, defending him after he was vehemently attacked by him, and his ideology was attacked by him. And Biden was not only attacking the policy that Bernie introduced, but the policies that our lives depend on and that we've been fighting for years. And Bernie still goes on defending him with little to no criticism. In fact, people were celebrating, talking about he was poised and he was practicing civility and da 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 da. But whenever Tulsi just cites Veritas, she gets attacked for being a right-wing troll trying to funnel people into the right-wing ideology and propping up Veritas's brand. But what are we going to talk about the fact that Bernie is propping up a literal segregationist brand? He's propping up a literal rapist brand. He's propping up a racist brand, a warmonger's brand. Nobody wants to address that because their excuse whenever Bernie does it is, well, he signed a contract. Well, Tulsi's excuse is she wants to save the electoral system, but apparently that's not good enough. And when we are afraid to have that conversation, it's going to be hard to see us move forward and actually get away from this brand management that we've seen from progressives and start talking about issue-based policy.
All right, let's stop you there. All right, Nick, apologies. Jose, your response.
Yeah. You said, what was the question, Kit?
Well, essentially, how do we break away from hero worshiping of politicians and also move forward away from this current system that we have? Because one of the issues that we're constantly dealing with is that we're seeing Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, they're out of the race. They both endorsed Joe Biden, and of course we can go back and forth on that. But how do we break away from that hero worship, and at the same time, how do we make sure we build a coalition so that we can actually bring in much needed political reform and election integrity?
I'm gonna agree. Like that Bernie made a lot of mistakes. I have a lot of criticisms that aren't out there yet, and I'd like to air them out here. But I do agree we have to stop hero worshiping. I feel like Bernie Sanders is a brand, and that's the problem in our politics. Your name becomes your brand, and it's all marketing. And everyone that has been in Congress, whether they're about to leave, like Tulsi's about to leave or not, does that. Tulsi does that and is still doing that, in my opinion. And if she wants to run Green Party for Hawaii's governorship or Libertarian Party or start her own party, more power to her. I would support that. But let's just be honest about what she's doing. She's building her brand like all politicians do. Not the squad, Bernie Sanders, they haven't jumped to all of her policy. And that might have been a mistake for a lot of the moves that she's made. She makes good, decisive moves. She makes independent moves. So she goes rogue a lot. So maybe that's also why. There's not a lot of trust there. Bernie Sanders whipped up Republican votes to stop genocide in Yemen, and the House wasn't able to do that.
Tulsi and Requena did get that bill passed.
Niko, I'm going to have to ask you to hold on that again.
Go ahead, sorry.
It's still Jose's time.
Just saying that, you know, like building in, where's the energy to keep that momentum going, you know? It seems like if it's all going to be transactional, it's all going to be transactional, you know? I also will say Bernie's biggest mistake was trusting Chuy Garcia in Chicago, who played both sides between Warren and Bernie Sanders. So I'm not even going to blame anything that's out there right now. I'm going to bring it back home to Chicago. People that were in charge of winning the state, crucially in March for Bernie, were already halfway sold out. All right. So, and if I'm wrong, Chuy, maybe you should support Free Assange. What you call it? I will also just say, Tulsi, you know, like she defended Joe Biden against Kamala Harris's attack, which was the only decent thing that Kamala did. And Tulsi defended Joe Biden so well, Kamala dropped out, which we do celebrate. But if Kamala had stayed in, would that have made Joe drop out? I don't know. You know, so the primary was the primary. People made moves, you know, I'm not going to say that she did all the right moves or that Bernie did all the right moves. Tulsi endorsed Joe Biden while Bernie was still in the race, just being pragmatic and realistic. I don't know how that's any different than Bernie being the biggest contender to challenge the establishment pick in Biden, trying to
December 2nd.
Bernie had the policy and he had the energy and he had the wherewithal to listen to the most disaffected voices and what they were telling him in his campaign. He dropped the ball and he's going to have to live with that.
Okay. All right, Niko, your rebuttal.
So to be clear, I criticized Tulsi for defending Joe Biden whenever she was attacking Kamala and Warren, even though it was pretty clear from the beginning that she was attacking Kamala and Warren more so than defending Biden, especially Kamala, because Kamala was guilty of supporting the same type of segregationist policies in California. Now, as far as it wasn't her defending Biden that led to Kamala getting out of the race. Remember, Tulsi was on the debate stage doing Bernie's dirty work because he didn't want to touch Kamala. None of the candidates wanted to touch Kamala, and Tulsi went ahead and did it for them. Now we don't have to worry about Hillary Clinton's donors' 2017 pick to be the presidential nominee. Now we can actually have a candidate that can be challenged for what his past is and what his policies represented and how many lives it's destroyed since. That's actually Tulsi who was able to do that and hold Kamala accountable. In fact, she tried to hold all the people accountable that Bernie tried to befriend. Remember how he befriended Warren and then she ended up taking a lot of his votes, even though Tulsi tried to warn him and he didn't want to listen, and Nina tried to warn him and he didn't want to listen, and Tulsi supporters tried to warn Bernie supporters and he didn't want to listen, but yet here we are. Why? Because once again, there is this obsession with quote unquote holding Tulsi accountable while never giving her credit, so you never actually acknowledge all the things that she is bringing forward into light that could actually change the way the system and that election was going. First and second of all, Tulsi did not drop out before Bernie dropped out. Bernie admitted himself before he dropped out, he had been working with the coalition with Joe Biden for weeks. The only reason he had stayed in the race is because he was trying to help out a Democrat judge in Wisconsin who ended up losing anyway. So in other words, he played y'all. And Tulsi even said on Jimmy Dore's show, well, I'm not going to say what the conversation is between me and Bernie's campaign, but it's pretty clear to everybody what that conversation was. Don't endorse me because I'm dropping out anyway. Now, if Bernie would have shown the same energy and willingness to coalesce with Tulsi as he did with the establishment, maybe, just maybe, Tulsi and Bernie would have been able to survive, and Tulsi would have had a reason to stay in and fight. But unfortunately, she did sign the exact same contract as Bernie, and just like Bernie, I criticized her, although I am the type that is willing to admit I understand where we came from and how we got here. I had a problem with her endorsing Biden in any situation, but I also understand, well, if we would have discussed election fraud, if Bernie would have defended her when she was getting cheated off the debate stage, if Bernie supporters would have defended her like when she was getting cheated off the debate stage, maybe, just maybe, this race looks completely different. But everybody wanted to just nitpick because she decided to show up Bernie time and time again. Once again, just like we're going to be discussing later, where's Bernie at on this Assange issue? Where's Bernie at on the Manning issue? Where's Bernie at on the Snowden issue? In fact, he said Manning should have been prosecuted. So he said he she's tracking the Assange issue, but hasn't done anything about it. And this Snowden issue, which affects everybody, he also hasn't done anything about. Tulsi is on all 3 pieces of legislation to pardon Assange, pardon Snowden, and make sure whistleblower protections are there, and the Espionage Act cannot be taken advantage of. And yet, once again, even though they were allowed 4 days ago when they thought she was trying to talk shit about Ilhan Omar, where are they at? There's no one talking about this issue. No one talking about that Tulsi's trying to solve this issue. And this is a systemic issue.
10 more seconds.
So another issue, like the OFF Act, like the Security American Elections Act, like these pieces of legislation that we're seeing right now, a systemic issue does not have the energy behind it, the positive energy, as progressives like to throw the same negative energy in her direction when they think that she is pandering to the right, when instead she's just being the same independent-minded individual that she's always been.
All right. Jose, what's the final word? Rebuttals, comments.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with Tulsi is I feel she's a military recruiter, and that's nonpartisan and bipartisan, and I think she comes at it from a progressive place. But that's also why I feel gaslit, where she needs Project Veritas sympathizers, but she also needs to be reforming the intelligence community from the inside by taking on the Espionage Act, this really important week. Bernie is weak on foreign policy. I think, feel like the intelligence community's probably always viewed him much differently than their relationship with Tulsi has been. So I don't know how that's affected his politics or the way he takes stands. That doesn't make it right when he makes mistakes. And I definitely called him out, on being weak and with Venezuela, and he did speak immediately about Bolivia, which I did thank him for. Tulsi did take a week on that, but she did come around to the same conclusion, and emphatically so, which, again, goes back to, I like where Bernie's instincts have been and where he's taken the movement. He's been guiding millions of people, all disaffected, all rallying for different reasons, into one direction. I think he's been more effective in building coalition than Tulsi to move his issues along, which is, why, while I'm not in the Brooklyn left or part of, Ro Khanna's, California Democrat stuff, if that's moving policy forward, like Medicare for all, like a college guarantee, like abolishing ICE, like defunding the police. And that's keeping it current here in Chicago, where now local city council people can run on those issues and stump on those issues, and there's an audience for that. I think that's been a little bit more effective in changing my personal life than Tulsi's well-intentioned and good moves at the national level, but I feel not really focused on the coalition building that, as an organizer in Chicago, I feel I need to be in tune with.
I do have to clarify something real quick. So you said,
go ahead. 2 minutes.
Waited a week after about the Bolivia thing. That's not true. Actually, what happened was she was sick, which I reported on, because she went away, made a press release about it. And then also she gave the best answer on Bolivia, whereas Bernie seemed to only support Evo Morales, merely because Evo Morales had endorsed him previously. Tulsi said very fervently, the United States should not be interfering in anyone else's election, because that's exactly what we were doing. So even there, she separated herself when it came to foreign policy. And instead of just pandering to the socialist left, she instead said what needed to be said, which a lot of the libertarian right and the progressive left all agreed on, which is there should be no intervention, regardless of whether or not it's a socialist or otherwise in power. And so I just wanted to go ahead and clarify that. Excuse me.
All right, real quick before we will move on, Jose.
Just add that Bernie called it a military coup. More than just defending Evo Morales. He was basically saying the military taking over elections makes it a coup.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as the United States saying the United States absolutely should not intervene, in addition to calling a military coup, which was led by the United States. That's the difference. It's good things are good, bad things are bad, but one person addressed why it is the way it is and what system is causing it to be that way, and the other one just said what everybody knew to be true. It was a military coup, and they were pretty obvious. They announced, hey, the military's taking over. Yeah, it was a military coup. But one person admitted, had the bravery to say why there was a military coup and how it was possible.
All right. Jose, any other final comments? Because we are going to move on now.
Yeah, just, that military coup happened when Bernie was doing a town hall. So they caught him kind of hot on mic in the moment, and he didn't flinch. And that did set a narrative tone. And Tulsi was sick, but days later, the narrative tone was there to build upon. Not only was a military coup, the U.S. was responsible.
All right. We are going to switch things up now, and this has to deal with maybe just a short minute response. Which was a short minute response in regards towards criticism that you would have just initially right off the bat. Don't have to go into full detail about both the campaigns. Bernie Sanders, Jose, what kind of criticism do you have for Bernie Sanders, and Niko, likewise, criticism for Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, things that you wanted to see? I'll give you each 2 minutes, starting off with Jose.
The mistakes that Bernie made are tied to the same reasons I like him. He's a lifelong, curmudgeon. He has not made friends inside Congress, despite being in Congress for 30 years. But all the same, he still kept to his brand, his edge of trying to find, entryways, from the outside. I think that has been more helpful in building coalitions cross-nationally. I think that has changed the conversation in Congress, which has trickled down to the state level in Chicago, in Illinois, which hopefully we can build upon. And in the City Council of Chicago, we have 6 DSA, socialist candidates that we can get a little bit more nuanced about how that's more of a brand, but it's a brand to be built upon. I think that, ultimately his mistakes were letting himself be branded by the likes of perhaps AOC, of Chuy Garcia, of, some might say Tulsi. But I think ultimately he wouldn't hold it against anybody that followed him, and what he was trying to do. I mostly take issue with anyone trying to jump over him and say, well, not only can I do it better, I've been doing it better. I don't think that's really speaking to the truth of all that his campaign had to deal with and did accomplish.
All right. Now I'm going to stop you there. Now, Niko, this question is specifically for you. Any kind of criticisms that you had with Tulsi Gabbard and her campaign? What are some of the issues you want to bring up that perhaps you want to bring awareness to?
Yeah, so I think that one of the biggest flaws Tulsi's campaign has is that she didn't actually speak enough to the ridiculous amounts of legislation that she was introducing and that she was fighting for. And I think that was a huge disservice to not only her, but her supporters as well, who constantly spoke up for it. And although, don't get me wrong, she was very policy focused, but I do think that at a certain level, she just was introducing so much that she probably should have organized or created a methodology in which she would discuss the issues or the legislation regarding the issues that were prominent at the time. And although she did a decent job of it, I think that would have been huge. And if she did it more frequently, I think that it would have been, I think she would have had a lot more success. I also think that I think that she kind of maybe needed a little bit more guidance on her social media, which because she's kind of, I think it's a cultural thing where she's very, very straightforward. And her sister told me this is a Hawaiian thing. If she feels something and it's on her mind, she's just going to say it. And she doesn't think of the backlash. Whereas obviously, as we know, when you're running for president, everything you say has weight to it. And when she did not consider enough, in my opinion, what I like to call Rose Twitter progressive left, and how they would react to things when she would give them ammo. Now, granted, for any sensible person, it wouldn't be ammo. They would just take it for what it is. But she wasn't running in a race where people were judging her sensibly. And that's something she has to be aware of. Mm-hmm. I think that also, instead of just supporting UBI, I think she should have supported both UBI and the federal jobs guarantee. I think she would have won a bigger coalition doing so. I also think that her endorsement of Biden was, I don't want to necessarily say ill-timed merely because of COVID. But I think that she should have never endorsed him. Now, granted, I understand the contract situation and she may want to run for president again. But at the same time, Biden is antithetical to everything she represented. She supported reparations. Biden is damn near one of the reasons we deserve reparations. She introduced legislation to demilitarize the police when we know Biden's part of the reason, or most of the reason, that the police are militarized. And so when you have someone who's antithetical to everything you campaign for, I don't think you should get on camera and pretend that they represent the aloha that you've represented the entire campaign. But outside of that, I also wish that she would have just told the truth about how Bernie was treating her, because a lot of people were just, because she never criticized Bernie, she never held any of the other Congress people accountable who were basically throwing her under the bus. Some of those Congress people, for example, AOC and Ilhan Omar, ran on the OFF Act, the Off Fossil Fuels Act.
10 seconds.
And then pretending like it didn't exist. And so because there was nobody really being held to account, everybody sought somebody to seek accountability from. And that person happened to be Tulsi, even though, in my opinion, she has some control of redirecting that to the people who should have been held accountable.
All right. So you both addressed your criticism of both your candidates. Now we're entering into our final phase, and this has to deal with the future of independent media and press. So this will be the final question with then closing statements from both of you. Niko, Jose, we have all been working in independent media and journalism, and I don't want to speak on behalf for every other channel, whether it's Convo Couch, your network, our network, Jimmy Dore. We have to worry about censorship and the protection of whistleblowers and those who are speaking truth to power. And recently, there are these resolutions right now. House Resolution 1175, which is to drop charges against Julian Assange. House Resolution 1162, that's dropping charges towards Edward Snowden. And House Resolution 8452, the Project Brave Whistleblowers Act to reform the Espionage Act to protect future whistleblowers. Gentlemen, these are really good bills, and whether or not they ever see the light of day in our current Congress, because I think we know with a Congress with an 11% approval rating, they will not pass. But this is the start to something. But what is the future for independent media, press, as well as activism as a whole, as we're right now witnessing perhaps a system of fear where people will be afraid to speak out against those who are corrupt or abusing their positions of power? Niko House, we'll start off with you. Excuse me.
I do get worried at times when I see like what Assange is going through, and it takes like people basically yelling and chastising quote unquote independent media figures in order for them to just mention Assange consistently, given that this issue affects really all of us, including a lot of the mainstream media. I would just tell everybody to be cautious what you choose to omit in your reporting, because we've seen how this story ends. We really have. I do say that there is this, I would say that there's like a coalescence, if you will, of people kind of leaving this idea that electoral politics is the only way we can solve the problems of today. And I think that for the independent media, who has been focused more so on changing things systemically rather than pretending as if electoral politics can save the day, we're going to see people gravitate more so towards that media. And with that, you'll begin to see mandates built around issues rather than around personalities, which is what we were discussing earlier. Now, all charges against Julian Assange should absolutely be dropped. And this is just reality. I mean, the Supreme Court said in 2013 or 2014 that they would have a quote unquote New York Times problem. This was under Obama, if he was prosecuted under the Espionage Act, because like all anyone did was report. And you're talking about really a Pulitzer Prize contestant. He's won other journalism awards. Many of our leftist media, whenever they thought he was only going to uncover Bush's war crimes, thought he deserved awards. And then, of course, Snowden, who introduced, where his foundings and his whistleblowing led to legislation being introduced and passed, where they solidify the fact that the Patriot Act did not allow for people to just be spied on with absolutely just no reprieve and no one being held accountable. That was never part of the deal, even in the crazy fascistic Patriot Act. And so you're talking about there is tangible gains from both Assange and Snowden and other whistleblowers like Manning, and there are tangible gains from reeling in the Espionage Act, and I do believe that people are paying attention to this a little bit more, maybe not in the Twitterverse, but I definitely see the people who are paying attention to independent journalism taking these messages and going out into the world and spreading them. And I see a lot of people kind of saying to hell with Bernie and Tulsi, like, let's get down to these issues, because at the end of the day, all we really have is each other. And in my opinion, even though I am a Tulsi supporter, that's heartening to me, because at the end of the day, I think that people like Tulsi, and a lot of the times Bernie as well, believe that, hey, we should be focusing on these issues more than anything else, even if that means you have to push us to the wayside and focus strictly on those issues.
All right. Thank you. Jose, Mike, you have 3 minutes to speak. Your time.
Yeah. I want to echo a lot of that. I defend Bernie as hard as I do, not because I'm enamored with him or I want to stand him. I believe this is his last election ever. He's not up for re-election in the Senate, for a while. And people are human. I see someone says that Angela Davis sold out. I think that she's tired. I think she's just a human being. Dolores Huerta, a hero of mine growing up, endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016. I was livid and so happy when I'm sorry, what's her name? I'm blanking on her name. That played her in the movie and dated Cory Booker. Jesus.
You're talking about? Oh my goodness. I forgot her name too. What?
Rosario Dawson. Thanks you.
Rosario Dawson, yeah.
Rosario Dawson. Yeah, when she went against Dolores Huerta and it's like, no, I'm endorsing Bernie. Screw Hillary. And that was a moment, we have to build on that, I guess. That's where independent media, I think that we need to not be CNN. I hate to say this, we have to be a little bit like Fox News. We have to press on all 8 gears for all that we want to accomplish and have more discussions like this. I really appreciate this because, it adds clarity and it adds to the mission statement that we are still fighting for global human rights and and for anti-imperialism at home and abroad. I think that independent media, it's why Julian Assange's case is so important. We have to be fearless until we can't be fearless anymore. That's basically what Julian did. And, I have my criticisms of him, but at this point, it's like, this is torturous. And the amount of energy that we have to pour to get attention to this story is criminal, is controlled. Trump might die. Barr might have COVID. Things are in flux. I think that, one of the things that makes Assange so important, I was at a rally earlier today, and I was trying to talk to people, do you know about the Assange case? And they're like, okay, weirdo. No, I was surprised how many people didn't, and they're out there for all the right reasons, and they're out there to lend their energy for the right causes, but they're just like, yeah, he seems like a James Bond villain, but James Bond's an imperialist, so maybe that's cool. And I'm like, all right, let me clarify some stuff because that's where the public's at. I guess is really where my message is at. I disagree with some of the takedowns that I hear out there from independent media. I still feel like it's some of the best and most honest reporting on anti-imperialism and how to organize here at home. Electoral politics has always just been a marketing scheme in our system that's corrupt and capitalistic. But, Trump has been helpful in that, he's such a scary, weird traitor that in Chicago, we got to go ham on our messaging about we're communists. We want to abolish the police. Anything we want was on the table because Trump was president. And we hit that wall basically on where, what the Democrats think they can take, and we know
right,
where
we got 10 more seconds.
They're not going to follow through on, where DSA may go further, and where we even have to poke our own socialist newly elected to jump a little faster. So it's still the movement. It's not that electoral politics was ever the end-all be-all, but if electoral politics was what it was a shield. It was a shield from what Trump was doing, which is basically, hey, go shoot protesters. And if it was the right thing to do, it was the right thing to do, guys. Politics was a shield for that. That's all.
All right. So as we are ending our short time, this will be a final question to both of you. And of course, basically, I'm giving you guys the floor for final statements, anything you want to address or bring up. And also on top of that, because I think we set a higher standard than what we saw at the presidential debate. Each of you, this is my direct challenge to you, say something nice about your colleague that you were debating with. Something nice. And on top of that, too, if there's any events or activist groups that you want to plug in, as well as your social media, now would be a good time. So, Jose, we will give you 5 minutes. Niko House, you will also have 5 minutes as well. Closing statements and any activist groups or social media platforms you want to plug or where people can follow you as well. Jose, let's start with you.
Thanks. Well, I just want to say, Niko, you've been doing independent media for much longer. You have a whole body of work and a whole list of high-profile things. So I appreciate you coming and working, with HLM and agreeing to talk to me today. Also, you were part of the Dnc Fraud Lawsuit, and thank you for doing that. People in Chicago took issue with that. It's a very democratic town. That was the right thing to do for transparency and for accountability and for understanding what the Democratic Party really is. So I've never taken your animosity towards them with anything other than learned lessons. We're here in Chicago. We hear you. So, and thank you so much for also sticking to what what you say, what you stick to, which I think that's why you were asked to speak at the Movement for the People's Party, and you were the first one to correct the fact that no one spoke about Assange at that. So thank you for being that guy too. Here in Chicago, we have so much tribalism, so many little community groups. There's community groups of just 5 people that can be extremely effective at moving their issue and making noise or scaring the bejesus out of certain elected officials into action. The complications and nuances and the missed opportunities that we probably went through, these last 4 years are why I don't fault what anybody else is doing in their region anywhere. You're speaking to your region and to what and what you're organizing there, and I'm here to listen. And thanks for being part of this endeavor to clarify and get all of us to understand. That's what these internet tools should be used for. That's what Assange has also always fought for at the highest levels, and why his voice is greatly missed and needed. There's a shout out to Kasano Sawant in Seattle, who's part of the Socialist Alternative Party, and the Socialist Alternative Party in Chicago have not been chumps when it comes to issue organizing or electoral politics. They've been very selective in who they endorse, and they go hard. Thank you, Socialist Alternative. Chicago DSA, which is a little bit of the bigger umbrella, plays a little weird games with the Democratic establishment and police from a very antagonistic point of view, and still some terms of civility. Still, they're doing some of the most effective work in spreading education on how to defund the police and what that would look like, on how to stop evictions. And to that end, they are being respectful about building on the local community groups. That's the thing about Chicago. I started organizing in 2013. There are people that have been organizing since the 70s that are just like, who the hell are you? Chicago DSA, for the most part, has been respectful of trying to build on the legacy of local community groups and histories and putting that under umbrella, which is no small feat. So shout out to them, but really shout out to those local community groups that took the 2019 election with a lot of skepticism, took this home primary with a lot of skepticism, but are still moving their people into marches, into into CAPS meetings, into LSU meetings, into budget hearing meetings, into all that boring stuff that people don't like to do, but it's really important part of organizing. Chicago Hostage Initiative, the Pilsen Alliance, the COCO organization, One North Side, Jane Adams, Housing Center. Sorry if I missed you guys. You guys know. And then the IPOs, the independent political organizations, in Chicago, have been the entry point, the vanguard to getting municipal services out of electoral politics. It works in Chicago's municipality, maybe not the most transferable system, but for those people that got it started in the 12th Ward and the 25th Ward, I hear the 11th Ward, of course, 33rd, 35th, 40th Ward, 22nd Ward, Chewy's Ward. Why are you guys still pro-gentrification? That's my question. But everyone else, awesome work. That's all I got right now. We start seeing more terrible things right now.
All right. Well done, Jose. And again, you forgot one thing. You are always live with us every Monday at 5 p.m. Chicago time. Don't worry, I got the closing statements. Nico, you have the final word, and then I'll end up with closing statements. Again, same question. Any other final statements, as well as where we can find you online and social media and any activist groups that you want to plug? You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
So let me just say I appreciate you, Jose, just sticking by your guns and actually hopping on camera and being willing to debate your beliefs, because to be frank with you, a lot of people will tag me on Twitter about how they feel about anything, and then I'm like, okay, let's hop on camera, and all of a sudden it's like Twitter suspended their account. They just go dark. I don't know what the hell happened to them. So I appreciate you actually willing to take the challenge and hop on camera with me and defend your goals, which I think you did a good job doing. And of course, I do have to just say that I appreciate you being part of the Hard Lens team. I've been friends with Kit and the Hard Lens team for quite some time. I remember where they started at. I know, where they've ended up, and it's crazy because where I saw a lot of people kind of go off the beaten path a little bit, or I should say stay on the beaten path. I saw Hard Lens go off the beaten path, stay objective, and constantly become better at what they do, not only in covering the local activism and politics of Chicago, but also covering foreign policy and, of course, the broader national politics and electoral politics. And to see, I'm sure that y'all have disagreements within your group, but yet you're still putting yourself in a position where instead of chasing some mainstream journalism job or, some mainstream, working for the Chicago Tribune or something to that effect, you decide to put yourself in a position to fight for the right things and bring objective news coverage to all of the most pertinent issues of today with Hard Lens. And I appreciate that. And I also appreciate, you just acknowledging that there have been people who have mistreated Tulsi, and there are people who have been unfair as far as the issues are concerned, because a lot of people are not willing to give that ground, and it shows a lot of integrity that you were willing to do so. And of course, I just appreciate your on-the-ground activism. I feel like that's like one of the main things that this independent journalism movement is missing, is more journalists who came from activism rather than journalists just, pontificating from behind their desks, virtue signaling about things they've never fought or cared enough to get out there and fight for and put their lives on the line for, which a lot of us have done in one form or another. Whether it be, I know Hard Lens is constantly on the ground, just mucking things up for local politics. And Fiorella and Pasta, been to Portland, Denver, been, gassed by cops. And of course, I had my life threatened. I went homeless for the Dnc Fraud Lawsuit. And that's the kind of independent journalism we need, because you all understand, like my team understands, what Julian Assange is going through, because that could be us one day. We haven't done it. We haven't been in that position yet, but it could be us one day. And that's one thing that I'm very thankful for, and I appreciate your involvement in. I don't want to give necessarily a shout out to any organization as much as I want to give a shout out to the movement of the independent movement that is being built, the coalition that is being built around the issues. And I really hope that people hear what both of us had to say about this regarding that particular part of the debate, which is, if we don't start coalescing around these issues, we're going to lose, guys. I hate to break it to you, but it does matter who in this election as far as Trump and Biden, but it's really just a determining factor of whether you're going to notice all the bad stuff happening and whether you're going to react 4 years later to the bad stuff happening, because the liberal and neoliberal media is not going to allow you to criticize Biden the way you were allowed to constantly criticize Trump with no pushback on whether or not it was a truth or a lie. So if we don't get behind these issues now, rather than the focus on who's going to be the next fascist, the neo-fascist, is he going to continue to maintain office, or is it going to be the civility fascist who comes in, but, gives you fascism with a smile and a little bit of dementia? We're going to not see our issues pushed through. Like I always say, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, even Angela Davis, even though, me and her, we're on the outs right now, I still love her. I understand, like Jose said, she's tired. But all these great people, Fred Hampton, these people didn't vote. They did it, whether they did or not, I guess we would never know. But they made it very clear whenever Nixon and JFK we're running against each other. We don't really care who wins. And a lot of people would have considered even back then that JFK would have been on our quote unquote side. We don't care who wins. We're segregated. Our electoral politics are trash. Foreign policy is trash. Capitalism is running rampant. And both of y'all have not really spoken to changing that systemically. So we're going to challenge both of y'all, regardless of who wins, to force you to acquiesce to the issues that we hold dear. And that's what happened. RFK had to beg Martin Luther King and JFK for them to meet, because Martin Luther King wasn't having it. He didn't care if he had a donkey beside him or an elephant beside him. And that's really where we have to be at. But before we see our issue begin to change again, because we've seen them take BLM, we've seen them take these police, this quote unquote police reform and criminal justice reform. We've seen them even take electoral politics like what we're discussing today and try to pretend that the Democrats or Republicans are on our side. We know for a fact that they're not. But the truth is, people like Jose, people like myself, people like the rest of Heartlands, and people like the rest of the MCSC network and some others, Jimmy Dore and the rest, we're the ones who are on your side. Whether or not we are supporting the same candidate at the time is not really the important thing. The important thing is when it comes down to it, if you go out into the streets, you're going to see one of us there, depending on where you're at. And that's what we need more of. And that's what we need to uplift more than anything else. If you fight hard for Bernie, if you fight hard for Tulsi, now that both of them are out of the picture, you should be fighting 3 times as hard as the media, or for the media and the activists that are trying to bring justice to this system. Because at the end of the day, politicians disappear and reappear, but these journalists and these activists are here until they're not anymore, and they're going to continue to be here. But whether or not they get noticed and seen is up to you guys.
All right, and that's a good note to end on. And again, these are the closing statements. First and foremost, Niko House and Jose Requena. Thank you, both of you. I think on behalf of the audience, of course, you can't win everyone over, and you're not going to get everyone's approval. Everyone's going to have their own opinion after this debate as well. Please put your comments in the section below, but I at least am proud to say that this debate was held to a higher standard than what we saw on Tuesday night. And again, I'm looking forward to future working collaborations with both you, Jose, as you were with us on our show, and you as well, Niko House. Again, everyone, now's the time to support independent media, and also at the same time to don't hero worship politicians. Don't fall in line with talking points. We all must be critical. We all must choose a different path. We all must step up and get involved. And as I always say on the show, don't be that person who says that they wish they can help. Help out your community, help out with community organizers in any which way you can, whether it's being part of a group or just checking in on your neighbors. With that being said, I'm the host of Hard Lens Media, Kit Adrian Cabello. I want to give a shout out to Hard Lens Mona for moderating the chat. I want to give a shout out to all of you who have joined us as well. Shout out to Daniel Lupker, who was taking care of everything on the technical side of this board.
Shout out to you, Daniel. He's always behind the scenes. I always forget to shout him out because he's always behind the scenes.
Sometimes he's always on the front lines too. Again, if you want to learn more about Heartlands Media, we are live on Rockfin every Monday and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Chicago time. We do have a live stream show on HLM, which is where we're live every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday with Lainey Peterson, and Friday at 5 p.m. Chicago time. And then all our shows or interviews or live streams like this are put under our older YouTube channel, because now this old channel is now back to life again, which is great. So clips, interviews, special events will be here on our old Heartlands Media YouTube channel. It's back to life, thankfully, because of all of you guys. And also, if you want to see some fun entertainment, check out Chicago Reacts. Be sure to subscribe to that as well. With that being said, peace to everyone, and let us all do what we can to build a better future.